in April, some of the first data coming out, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, JAMA, they were finding already that upwards of 90% of the folks who were experiencing severe symptoms or losing their lives, upwards of 90% of these folks had 50% of them had one comorbidity. The other 50% had two or more, essentially. And those three comorbidities or additional causes of death were hypertension, diabetes, and obesity. And so I'm just like, guys, we're in trouble. We are a nation that is, we are the sickest nation in the history of humanity, self-inflicted, to be clear, self-inflicted. Mm-hmm. We have over 200 million people who are overweight or obese. Right now, here in the United States, it's a number we can't really even, it doesn't make sense. And within the next 10 years, half of the population will be clinically obese. And this is well known in the data. We have a problem. 60% of the United States population has some degree of heart disease already. 135 million people are type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic right now. And right now here in America, already about 70% of the population are already on pharmaceutical drugs, but that method hasn't worked. Everything keeps getting worse. All the problems are worse. And so seeing this data, and I shared this very early on. I was like, hey, these issues that make us susceptible to all manner of infectious diseases, we have to fix this. And people, of course, the majority of people who we ride with, they're like, yes, this is absolutely true. This is not getting talked about. But there's that small percentage of people, they're like, well, it's too bad we can't get people healthier overnight. Guess what? It's been almost a year now. We're knocking on the door of a year. Wouldn't now be a good time to shift gears and let's talk about getting our citizens healthier? It'll never happen. It's never going to be a part of the conversation because it never was. Right. And so the CDC published a report, and this was just recently, and they affirmed what I said in the very beginning. 94% of the folks who lost their lives with this virus, confirmed cases of COVID-19, 94% of them have had an average of 2.6 pre-existing chronic diseases. 94% of them. But because of the framing of the media, we'll just focus on that 6%. Well, perfectly healthy people are dying too. What? 94%. Can we not talk about this? Can we not talk about it? And so, and actually, of course, like myself, I'll go and actually look at the data. I'll look at the reports. I'll look at the studies. And one of the other factors with that, so these are pre-existing chronic diseases and or comorbidities. And one of the major comorbidities was influenza. And like the flu just disappeared. But it's one of the comorbidities with folks. And it's just like, if it's COVID, it's COVID. It's end of story. And we should be talking about these things. Most importantly, in what I just said, the fact that we're so susceptible because we're already diabetes is an inflammatory condition. Obesity is an inflammatory condition. Heart disease is an inflammatory condition. And this particular virus, whatever your belief system is around the virus, it appears to have a tropism towards the lungs, right? Hyperinflammatory responding, because it's not the virus or any virus that creates the inflammation. It's your body's reaction to an exposure that creates, your body's doing the inflammation. It's trying to protect you. And so if you take a pre-inflamed individual and then they become exposed to something that creates hyperinflammation, what do you think is going to happen? But nobody's talking about how can we help to reduce the inflammation that we're experiencing with these chronic diseases, because we never did, Aubrey. Like, this is just something the system doesn't do. And again, we're like, okay, we're going to get a drug to fix it. We're going to get a drug to fix our problems. And it's just not how stuff works. Just look at the data, that's the thing. And one of your guests before, he's just like, science isn't very scientific right now. And like, for me, that just really jumped out. I was like, that's perfectly said. Very simple. And, at this time, having data like that, any person who is just having just a modicum of logic and seeing like 94% of the folks who've lost their lives, whatever you believe about this particular illness, had a 2.6 pre-existing chronic diseases. And to say like this is something we can't do something about, to say that this is something that's okay, that our citizens are so susceptible and so sick, and just ignore that and take another drug, it is so inappropriate. and we could do so much better. And this was the thing, last thing. And I know you did too, and I know many folks listening, we just felt that we were better than this. And we're not. We're not. But we are. Let me be clear. We are, but we just don't know it yet. We are so much more. We are so much more capable of understanding and science and compassion and working together. But we're really getting to see the worst of us. We're getting to see our worst tendencies, and we're getting to see how strange and twisted things can be, you know, even with the censorship and all this stuff. Science should not be censored. I had on the top cell biologist, you know, he's really the person who pioneered epigenetics as far as like getting into popular lexicon, Dr. Bruce Lipton. 2 of his programs, he put so much into what he does, got taken down, you know, got censored. He's your favorite cell biologist, you know, favorite cell biologist. He's like your rapper's favorite rapper. When we're talking about epigenetics, when we're talking about virology, like this guy he's been teaching doctors for decades, you know, about cellular functioning and the immune system. It's just like, oh, his opinion doesn't matter right now. Shut him up, because he has a perspective that doesn't fit into the popular narrative.
And that's what's really scary for me, is the idea that science is fixed, which it never has been, not once. And we're talking about these things that never has been, but all of a sudden science has a capital S and it's a fixed singular opinion. It can't be. The respiration for science, what allows it to breathe, is questioning alternate hypotheses, weighing out different theories, looking at different factors, looking at where there's things that we could kind of grab a hold of and start to understand. But when you shut it down and just say science says nothing. Science is a process. Science is a method. Yes. You know, it is not a thing that speaks with a singular voice. It's a chorus of disparate ideas that sometimes find, you know, coherence and sometimes find resonance. But without the whole chorus being heard and everybody looking, you're inevitably going to be steered down the wrong path, as we have constantly throughout history. When we said sugar is fine, but fat is bad. I mean, that was one of these cases. Right. When we said, oh, you know, all the ulcers in your stomach, that's caused from stress. And some doctor was like, no, it's not, caused by H. pylori. And they're like, shut up. And he's like, I'm telling you. And they're like, shut up. And then he finally had to drink the beaker himself. And like, this is the way it goes. Like, people have to speak counter to the narrative, because there was billions of dollars wrapped up in antacids and billions of dollars in all of these treatments. And actually, you know, these gastric surgeries that were good. The machine gets rolling, and it's so necessary for there to be these other voices that come out and challenge that. And look at all the different factors. And going back to what we're experiencing now, I just saw a recent study that says there was a correlation between vitamin D deficiency and serious negative outcomes regarding COVID, and a strong correlation. Now, correlation isn't causation, you know, but that's something to take a look at. Let's just allow the process. Let's allow everybody to talk about, all right, we see a strong correlation here. What can we do? You know, how can we support our people to make sure that they're not vitamin D deficient? Because there's a good chance that this is playing a part in the system that we have, along with all of the food, along with everything else. And unfortunately, you know, and you got to look at why, and the why is, you know, I think very simple. A lot of people have to say it's a conspiracy. I don't think it's a conspiracy. It's just a self-serving bias. When you have a giant reward, like there's a recent article said $32 billion is going to go to Moderna and Pfizer. You have a $32 billion prize. If you have that in your company, however good your fucking employees are, if you're like, there's $1 million for someone who can do this thing, guess what? It's going to challenge them. They're going to, maybe a few won't abide by it, but some will. It's just self-serving. You'll be able to shift your understanding of how the world works and what morality is and what's right. It'll just filter through your brain in a way that's going to serve you in the best way. So no conspiracy necessary. No deep state necessary. Maybe it exists. I don't fucking know. But it's not necessary. All you have to know is that people are going to look at the way that the world is in a way that's going to serve them the best. And I think that's really what we're experiencing here. But people aren't seeing that, you know, at the very simplest level.
Yeah, I love what you said, man. Science is a process. And throughout history, we continue to really go at the throat of people who go against the popular narrative with science, even though they have, quote, science to back up and affirm what they're saying is real. You know, like there were things taught in universities that were absolutely absurd today, about, for example, where we fit in the galaxy, stuff revolving around us. Like the guy's like, you know what? Actually, the sun's the center of the, sorry, kill him. They're like, no, he's got to go. Kill him. He can't be, what? And same thing, today, one of the holy trinity of protection is to wash your hands. Dr. Inez Semmelweis, he's the one who brought that forward. And the medical establishment went after him. They called him a lunatic. They said there was no grounds. And he studied it. He reported. He did tests. He tracked and he found out, hey, guys, maybe after we're tinkering with these dead bodies and then we're like going and, giving birth, helping women to give birth, maybe we might want to, put a little water on our hands, wash a little bit of that off, and they were just like, this is the way we've done it. This is the way it's always been done. What are you talking about? And so, but now today it's become,
well, and just to finish, they threw him in a loony bin where the people in the loony bin were beating him and eventually wounded him. And then they believe that he died of sepsis because the people who were fixing the lacerations from him getting beaten for having this crazy idea that you should wash your hands after doing an autopsy before delivering a fucking baby, which is like obvious to us now, but they didn't have that understanding that germs could transfer. He thought it was little pieces of dead person that were on people's hands, which is actually pretty kind of accurate, like the bacterial pieces of the dead body of the decaying process were being transferred to these mothers. They threw him in a loony bin, they beat him, and then they didn't wash their hands when they were treating him, and he died of sepsis. I mean, how fucking horrible and ironic is that? But that's science with a capital S acting in a fascist and oppressive way. And there's a litany of examples of that. And I think we're going to look back, 10, 20 years from now, whatever, 5, maybe 3, who the fuck knows? And we'll be like, dang, like so we really fucked up.
The question is, what are we doing that about right now? What are we doing that same thing? Because the popular narrative and what we talked about in the last episode, because when the treatment for what we're dealing with came along, this holy trinity, hand washing, social distance, and wear a mask, I just went into the data. I wanted to make sure that the masks are going to be an effective prevention metric without venturing into the ridiculous. And I might have shared this, or maybe it happened after we talked, but my neighbor, this was a 108-degree day. He went from his car, he's in his late 20s, he doesn't have an autoimmune disease. He went late 20s, early 30s, walked from his house to his car, full on gas mask with the two things right here, head to toe clothing, gloves, boots, mask, couldn't see anything with his face because he had the gas mask on because of fear, just to go from his door to his car.
Wow.
And I'm just like, what are we doing here? Is this actually based on reality, or are we going too far? And so I went to the data to find out what are the most effective metrics here so we can utilize masks in a way that makes sense without venturing into the ridiculous and creating a culture around us where this is a norm based on assumption or superstition and not based on science. And so I went into the data looking for like, okay, how can I find ways that this actually works? And I just kept being surprised over and over again because the randomized controlled trials, we already had pretty good data on this. Randomized controlled trials, this is the gold standard because we're looking at a specific intervention and a specific outcome versus what is being pressed in popular culture, popular media. These are based on theoretical models. This is based on theory. It's because we can see the image of like when you're breathing out and like you could see the mask is preventing the aerosols and droplets. And it's just like, look at it. See, clearly it works. But then how does this play out in the real world? Because here's the thing. If you can also see in that same special fancy imaging, if you could see the number of viruses that are actually in that room, you couldn't see anything else but viruses. We're swimming in them. There are hundreds of trillions. That number isn't even big enough. Just in the room that you're in right now, it's covering your entire body. It is the most permeate. As far as things here on this planet, there are more viruses than anything else on Earth. And we just don't get it. We're doing that thing where it's, like you said, it's a big ass capital science, and we're not understanding the basic tenet of how viruses exist in our world. We've become afraid of something that's invisible. And it's just like, we keep looking, oh, we found the thing. We keep looking deeper and deeper and deeper. We found this is the thing that creates sickness. But the reality is very different. We, as human, when they did the Human Genome Project, mapped us out, we are 8% endogenous retroviruses. Even the ability for humans to reproduce and to have a placenta, that was designed and evolved from the work of viruses. Our immune system is rooted from viruses. Viruses created our immune system that defend us against viruses. These are all basic premises. And then, of course, it's just like, well, that's not a pathogenic virus. It's not a novel virus. And that was the thing that we were told in the beginning. We don't have an innate immunity to this. Well, there's also this thing called the adaptive immune system. And this is why, even as today, it's about 65 million confirmed cases of COVID, which again, that's all that's debatable. I get that. I'm just going with the numbers so we can communicate on what the popular narrative is. 65 million confirmed cases, about 1.6 million folks have lost their lives, which, by the way, sidebar, they've been relegated to numbers, a little ticker, little stock market ticker on the news that people, and I was just with some folks, they don't even see it. It's become normalized to them. I was like, guys, you don't see the number? They're like, no, I didn't even notice, because they sit and watch the fucking news. And so 65 million people, 1.6, 1.7 million folks have lost their lives. We don't say shit about the 64, 63 million people who are okay. We don't say anything about them. It's like it doesn't even exist. How do they survive? They didn't get the vaccine. It didn't come out yet. How did they make it? They have an immune system. It's what we're designed to do. And we're being taught, we're training an entire generation of humans with our children to not trust their bodies. We're training them to believe that they are not enough. When most folks honestly wouldn't have even known that this was a thing if it didn't have such a great system behind it. So many folks would have just went on about their lives and never realized that there was this thing going around. And what does the fear do? How has the fear affected our outcomes? And that's why I had Dr. Bruce Lipton on, again, renowned cell biologist, pioneer in epigenetics. His voice matters. His perspective matters. His science, what he's teaching, controls the rest of the sciences below it. And he shared the biology of fear and what happens. He went through step by step and showed it is one of the most powerful forces for suppressing our immune function. When you are afraid and you've already taken the nocebo, that if you get exposed to this, if you even start to have symptoms, even if you don't have it, your outcomes are going to be worse. You could die. Being sick is no longer okay. People used to say, even if you sneeze, like, you used to sneeze, people were like, oh, bless you. Now, if you sneeze, people are like, fuck you. God, fuck you. What happened? Like, we're so afraid of the just really basic human functioning and our ability to operate in our environment. And part of that too, Aubrey, and just like saying the thing out loud, we don't understand that we are a part of nature.
Amen.
We have created this veil that separates us, but it's still, you could try and hide. You are a part of nature. There is no other animal out here running around trying to hide from something invisible. We've lost touch. And the great thing about us, this is the beauty about humans though, is that we can research and dig in and find the things that are happening behind the scenes. But we don't want to go to such an extreme that we're trying to kill all the viruses and the bacteria, not realizing that we are mostly that. We are made of over 400 trillion viruses that make us up. Many of them will kill you. They're pathogenic, or what we call opportunistic. We are carrying around things that can kill us just as fast, if not faster, right now. But if our immune system is not compromised, we're okay. And the question is, why do we carry those things? Everything has a role. There's a symbiotic nature. There's a symbiotic relationship. Some of these viruses might be assisting in creating, scaphoas for your gastrointestinal tract. They might be in assisting your immune function. They might be assisting in your ability to see. These are all things that we will learn as the years go on. And we keep coming to this place of like, actually, viruses are not as bad as we thought. They're actually very helpful. There are opportunistic things, but we need to keep things in balance. We've swung so far to the other side. We're trying to kill everything. And we know what happens when we did that with bacteria. The average human, and this is in Eat Smarter, and this is the beautiful part about Eat Smarter. This book is going to be at every Target store in America. It's going to be everywhere. And people are going to finally get, because there's a virility to books, they're going to get access to this information. And one of the things that I talk about that's directly correlated with our decline in health, but also our incline in obesity, is related to the decline in the diversity of our bacteria. It's direct. We got hard data on this. The average person here in America, looking at the microbiome diversity of somebody who's eating more of an indigenous diet, hunter-gatherer, they have 4 times to 10 times more diversity in their gut than we do. The analogy of looking at your microbiome like a rainforest, we have a lot of endangered species and a lot of stuff has gone extinct for us. And that has led directly, and we can talk more about this, of course, when there's a decline in your diversity of microbes, there's a direct increase in your rate of obesity. And also all manner of chronic diseases, your susceptibility skyrockets when the diversity goes down. We've spent the past few decades trying to kill microbes, trying to kill bacteria, trying to kill pathogens, things that we can't see, not realizing that when we drop that antibiotic into our gut, which I've been prescribed antibiotics myself when I didn't have a bacterial infection. This is common. It's still common today, even after all this. But just imagine for the decades prior, I would have patients coming into my office who've been on antibiotics for skin issues, for example, autoimmune related skin issues for 20 years. 20 years on antibiotics. Like, that's okay. If it's an antibiotic, it doesn't care what jersey the bacteria is wearing. It's coming to kill. It's coming to kill. It's like dropping a little microbe nuke off in your gut. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to optimize your health starting today. And also make sure to click below to get a free gift. The question should be like, where the hell does fat go?
Where'd it go?
Does it go to
you just poop it out? Do you sweat it out? Does it?
You got that?
Do I breathe it in?
You've got that Thanos keychain. Does it go to another dimension? Exactly. You know what I mean? But what they did, and this was so fascinating, they actually tracked the path